Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. And I tell you what, if these promoters don't get their stuff together and understand the importance of working with each other, I think boxing as a whole is going to lose. Now, I'm going to tell you this, man. It's been going on since 2000, maybe 17, 18, maybe a bit closer to 19. It's like a silent revolution kind of taking place in boxing. And, it's like fighters are kind of realizing their self-worth. And it kind of created a bit of a movement to me that kind of threatens the old way of doing things. Now I'm going to tell you right now, I think a boxing promoter, and you can go all the way back, well, hell, actually, to when Bob Arum first got involved with boxing. Crazy, what's so crazy? Don King. You can go all the way back to when those guys first started with boxing. And really understand that promoters have always been, I think, central to helping fighters, make money. And they're also very instrumental to making sure there are going to be, various revenue streams from the event itself, ticket sales, live gate, the pay-per-view, and various modes of revenue, endorsement deals, sponsorship deals. Now, the thing is this, right? The promoters, they made a lot of deals, and to this day, make a whole lot of deals with the principals, and then they said, hey, we're going to give the fighters X amount. They put the show on. But the thing with what's going on with Al Haymon, it seems like a lot of promoters, they have some resentment towards him, and it almost seems like everyone is rooting for Al Haymon to fail. But I think when you look at the stable of fighters that PBC has, I think it's just a matter of time before these other promoters realize it's extremely important and it's incumbent upon all promoters in boxing to make sure they all work together and to not try, in my opinion now, to ostracize Al Haymon because of what he brings to the table with his fighters that these other promoters need so that their fighters can make quality fights. But the problem with a lot of these promoters, and even with Al Haymon, right, is just speed on the outside looking in, is it seems to be trying to account for, money. Money seems to be a big question when it comes to De La Hoya. Is he doing poorly? Is he doing well? He came out last year and said Golden Boy Promotions was worth over $1 billion. Eddie Hearn is always out here talking about money. How did he spend the $1 billion Dazn gave him? Did he lose it? Did they make all these changes and restructuring their model over there at Dazn because Eddie Hearn blew the money? Bob Arum seems to be the only one who's been, consistent and doing well and finding ways to win. And then the whole thing with Al Haymon. You ask some people, they say he's blown billions, he's blown millions. Other people say that he's a genius, a multi-billionaire. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what to believe anymore. But what I'll tell you is when it comes to the aforementioned names, and as far as their financial books, I'm going to tell you right now, that stuff's not accessible. And I think the promoters like the fact that their books and their financial information lacks transparency. Now, unfortunately, I'd say for a guy like me who's trying to create content, I can't dig as deep as I'd like. But when it comes to just how much money these promoters are making, the real person or individuals who suffer is the fighter. Just take a look at it. For you say, well, for those who say, what are you talking about, Hood Champion? Well, hell, just look at the whole model over there with UFC. How much money is being made for events and how much they're paying the fighters. You know, it's ridiculous. With boxing, there's not as much transparency. You really don't know. But the secret society has a lot of that shit on lockdown. Now, I'm going to tell you, when it comes to a lot of fighters, and fighters who have kind of set a precedence to make sure that they were taking care of themselves so they can avoid situations like what you see some fighters, like Terrence Crawford was in, like Shakur Stevenson right now sounds like he may be kind of in a sticky situation where he wants to leave Top Rank, but then he wants to stay. But when you look at that, right, some people keep talking about Mayweather and how Mayweather bought out his contract and he kind of set the tone for these fighters to kind of take their careers into their own hands. Let me tell you something. There was a person before Mayweather, and some would consider him a modern great. And this person took aggressive measures to avoid that fate of getting robbed or stuck in a super long promotional contract. And that was Sugar Ray Leonard. And I didn't know this. I had to go read up on a few articles, and I came across that, and I was like, wow, this is some pretty good information. After winning gold in the 1976 Montreal Olympics, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard, you know, he was a hot ticket. And, you know, there was a sense of worth as far as what he brought to the table. And he received several lucrative long-term offers from promoters. Now, he had an advisor who was actually his attorney as well, who made sure he didn't get stuck in that crap. See, they wanted to make sure that he went on in his career to have some flexibility and to make sure that it was more on a per fight basis, which is something that you're seeing a lot of fighters do right now. A 1-fight deal, 2-fight deal. And this same basis that Leonard eschewed when he went on and eschewed a long-term deal with a promoter in favor of using them on a per fight basis, right? Let me tell you something. That's kind of like what Al Haymon had arranged with all of his fighters. But now Al Haymon's in a situation, it doesn't matter how well he wants to take care of his fighters, you know, he's going to have to figure something out, and these other promoters are going to too. For years, all these promoters who could do it were having a lot of in-house fights, and the fans complained and complained and complained, and I think we're at a point to where we can kind of reset and see if we can get these promoters to work together, and for these fighters who are on these kind of per fight basis deals to maybe go from one promoter to the next and, you know, look out for themselves. But at the same time, it's almost like you're getting the promoters to come together and work, because if that fighter had stayed and had been permanently assigned to, let's say, like somebody like Terrence Crawford, who has he signed matter of fact, Canelo signed like a 3-fight deal with PBC. But after he's done, you know, the way they were doing things a long time ago, he would have been on a long-term contract and probably would have never had a chance to go out and fight with another network. But now you see these guys doing these per basis deals to where they can bounce anywhere they want and fight opponents on other platforms. So in a way, you're kind of getting the promoters to work together, because the fighter who was on another platform, after a couple of fights, he gets to go over to the neighboring platform and do what he wants. But the whole thing is, where we are now and what Leonard did, Leonard was able to become a commercial success in and out the ring. And you look at when he retired, that man had made over $150 million. You know what I'm saying? And if you don't know, something that you just don't see these days, which I still can't understand. You just don't see a lot of athletes, like boxers in commercials. And you all should remember. If not, you can look it up on YouTube. Sugar Ray Leonard for them 7-Up ads. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was probably more famous for them 7-Up ads than he was for his fights, to be honest with you. But I tell you what, that approach he took to taking care of his career and making sure he wasn't locked into no super long-term contract. I think Roy Jones did that. I think Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko promoted themselves and did it their way. But for you to do that and be basically an outlier, right? There has to be a little bit more than just talent. You got to kind of understand what you bring to the table and how those attributes kind of transcend into the marketplace. Now, the sticking point I see with PBC and Al Haymon, although Al Haymon seems to have the best intentions towards his fighters, I'm not saying other promoters don't, but Al Haymon by far seems to be the one who has the best intentions towards his fighters. If you disagree, you disagree. Okay, no problem. I'm just telling you from what I've heard fighters say. I'm not going off of this is what I've read and what I concluded. No, every single fighter who's with him has never said anything bad. But the problem I think he's going to run into is, you remember, De La Hoya had an issue with him. Bob Arum had an issue with him. And Eddie Hearn over there really he likes to stir the pot a bit, but Eddie Hearn kind of tries to remain neutral on some things. Because Eddie Hearn can look beyond the BS. Eddie Hearn only sees green. So you can sit there and slap Eddie Hearn's mother. If there's a way to make a 20 million, 30, 40 million, he'll be like, Mom, you just got to eat that slap. Because I'm going to go out here and make this 20, 30, 40 million. But you remember that whole thing about the Muhammad Ali Act and people saying that Al Haymon was violating it, being like the manager, the promoter, and basically doing things that he wasn't supposed to do. So Al Haymon is smart. He said, okay, I can't promote you and manage you, but I can be your advisor. And that, to me, shows the brilliance of his mind. Because when you're talking about compliance and explicit regulations, words matter. So he says, okay, I'm just going to be an advisor. And as an advisor, I can advise you on promotions. I can advise you on managing. And you basically be an independent broker and all this. But it's still the same damn thing. You know what I'm saying? He just has the mind to come up with something to get around the Muhammad Ali Act. And other promoters didn't. So that's their fault. But right now, with Haymon, I think he has like 160 plus fighters or something like that still. And when you take a look at what in the past, the two highest paid boxers in the past were Canelo and Anthony Joshua. Today, Canelo, because of the contract he signed, he's with Al Haymon. So you know it. Canelo, and it looks like they're trying to make fights in-house, but some of that stuff look like their plans are falling apart. So I know for a fact these other promoters would want to match up one of their guys with Canelo. And I know the money will be there. It's just we're not really sure what direction Al Haymon is going. But one thing I'll tell you, when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, he ain't going to sit there and be in a holding pattern because, PBC may not have their stuff together. That's one thing. Canelo will sit there and say, and sue you because he sued De La Hoya. So I think he would sue Al Haymon to get out of that deal that they struck if Al Haymon can't deliver in a timely manner those fights. But then again, I don't know what's all in the contract, so Canelo could be up shit creek. All right? And then Anthony Joshua. But right now, as far as highest paid fighters, I think Canelo, maybe AJ still. I know, recently, you got Tyson Fury getting some big money in Saudi. Usyk made some big money, but I would like to still think the two highest paid boxers today would probably be Canelo and Anthony Joshua. But the thing is, Canelo was in a long-term promotional contract. He got out from Golden Boy. Now he's with Haymon, and he realized that he can go from PBC to Dazn, PBC to Dazn. He could probably go to Top Rank if he wanted to. Canelo's figured out the system to where he can work with all the promoters. And Anthony Joshua has locked himself into a long-term promotional contract. Basically, Anthony Joshua signed his life away to Dazn. Now, my thing is this. When you look at the promotional free agents, almost all the fighters over there with PBC are basically like promotional free agents. You may have a one-off. You may have a one-off that's not, but that is very interesting. And you know what? You know who else was doing the same thing? Devin Haney. For a long time, Devin Haney doing the same thing, controlling their own career, not getting into no long-term contracts. I think Golovkin did it as well. And you see right now, Devin Haney just was doing it himself with his dad, went to the zone in Matchroom, went over to the Top Rank, back over to the zone in Matchroom. And I wouldn't be surprised if he went over to PBC for 2 fights to get like a Tank fight and a Tank rematch. I mean, but you see, it's forcing promoters to kind of talk and engage, and the fighters who understand how all this works, they're kind of giving us the fights we want. And they're doing it as if they were still attached to a promotional body, long term, but they're not. But we're still getting those fights. So when you take a look at these promoters, I think if they don't figure something out, you could see a situation, especially if what these smart fighters are doing, where they're promotional free agents and all these sound like 2-fight deals, and then you got another promoter that's offering big money. You could have a situation where these promoters may not be needed anymore. They could become obsolete because fighters have figured out how this works. You see, what you need more fighters to start going out on their own and figuring this out and educating other fighters. That's why you saw Terrence Crawford getting into it with Oscar De La Hoya and Ryan Garcia chiming in and talking about how fighters need to be able to understand the business and be at the table. And De La Hoya like, no, you just need to trust your promoter. That's why De La Hoya was saying that, because of what Sugar Ray Leonard did, what Devin Haney was doing, what Golovkin was doing, what Mayweather did by buying out his contract, what De La Hoya did by becoming his own promotional free agent, what Roy Jones did, what Klitschko's did, what Haymon has done for all of his fighters is, hey, there's just an understanding, no contract in place. There's just an understanding. Remember, Adrian Broner was talking about that with Al Haymon. They just had an understanding. No contract signed or nothing. There was just that each gave each other their word. And I tell you what, these promoters need to really sit back and understand what's brewing. Because these fighters, if they decide, you know what, if we don't fight, the promoters don't get paid. And if they can all come together and learn like a union and strike, I mean, it could be bad for the boxing fans. We don't want to hear that, but it could be horrible for these promoters. So they need to listen to their fighters. They need to work together. They need to make sure that they're handsomely compensating their fighters. Because, man, what other sport have we seen where they just rinse a team out the sport and say, no, you just got to go? You look in boxing, That doesn't concern you all? That HBO just dropped off the face of the earth? Showtime's dropping off the face of the earth? All the little boxing shows they had on ESPN is dropping off the face of the earth? So what the hell is going on with boxing? Now, I'm going to tell you this. There seems to be a bit of, still in boxing, with the traditional role versus the role changing. And Al Haymon is someone who's, see, I think he's more of he's more of evolved that traditional role. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people keep calling this man the most powerful person in boxing. And you know, I'm gonna be honest with you. I still don't know why they called him that. I think because they don't know much about him. You know. But I do know one thing. Richard Schaefer was over there with De La Hoya for a while, in Golden Boy. He ended up leaving. But he always spoke positively about Al Haymon. But if you look at what he's done, he's kind of taken that blueprint and kind of done something similar, where he is more like the fighter's the boss. I'm going to basically advise you. And that's kind of what he did when he started working with Pro Bellum and was the founder and CEO of Ringstar Sports. And also he had some other connections, man. Some boys out there in the desert. But that's a whole other story. But he understood the importance of trying to build up the fighters, putting on the events, trying to maximize revenues, and make sure that those revenues are enough to make sure that the efforts put forth by the promoter and the fighter, you know, result in handsome paydays. But there's other promoters out there who've talked about promoting and said, hey, look, it's just not that easy. And they said it's kind of like a circus, you know. You kind of find a town, you say, okay, we're going to have this event. So you get in the town, you put up a tent, you know, you have the act take place. When it's done, you pack up everything and you just figure out your next move. But that financial risk of putting on a boxing event, you know, that falls solely on the promoter. You know, they prepare the budget, then they negotiate with the managers, and the managers are the bargaining agents for boxers. And that's the one thing that makes me wonder, okay, we want the promoters to work together, but what role do managers play in all this? Are they complicating things? Because when I think of a boxing manager, you know who comes to mind? And it makes me want to punch my damn computer screen? Is that stinking Michael Conks. That weirdo who was over there at Pacquiao's team who didn't do shit. He looked like a goddamn snake, man. Over in the Philippines, pitching woo. He brought nothing to the table, leeching off of Manny Pacquiao. But it makes you wonder, when you start adding these layers, managers, you know, and advisors and consultants and whatever, they could make things very difficult for the fighters, because now they go out there and do something that a fighter doesn't necessarily agree with, but they're getting paid to do a job, so sometimes they don't even have to consult with the fighter. A good example is with Luis Ortiz being offered $5 or $6 million or something to fight AJ when Gerald Miller tested positive for all that goddamn cocktail. And his team, instead of taking the money and the opportunity to fight for those 3 belts, they were trying to push for more money. Eddie Hearn just dead him. So Luis Ortiz never had an opportunity. And when you look at how that fight played out with Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz, Luis Ortiz probably had a good chance to win that fight, especially being a power puncher, the southpaw, and an outstanding Cuban boxer. But nonetheless, you know, these networks typically pay the promoter a licensing fee in exchange for rights to exclusively domestic live broadcast events. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I would think for all these promoters to work together, that they would have to. It would probably take a lot because promoters enter into side agreements with the host venue. So we've had different promoters come together and work together before, but they always said it's not easy. They say it's hard. You look at that whole Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis crap. Look how long it took them to sort that out and back and forth and cross T's and dot I's, then uncross the T's and undot the I's and cross the T back and dot the I again. Because there are many, many, many variables, man, that come into play when you're trying to, get a fight together. You know what I mean? And then even once you get beyond all that, you're still dealing with all the crap with the venues and how much they want to charge promoters for using their space and, and everything else. So, I don't know. This is all interesting to me, man. People talk about the international TV rights and event sponsors. There's profits that come from that stuff. And sometimes promoters want to be selfish. They don't want to split it. They don't want to share it. So these are the things a lot of boxing fans, they don't know. That the promoters can also profit from international TV rights and event sponsors. That's why you always see, especially out in the UK, who's going to have Eddie Hearn talk about it, man. Who's going to have the international TV rights? And you may see someone takes that and someone takes something else. But I didn't even understand that. But now that I've taken time to go and do some research, it's like, that's why these guys are going crazy over who's going to get the international TV rights. Because there's profit that comes from that. You know what I'm saying? But once a promoter accesses all the sources of revenue and pays out related expenses, what's left over is usually theirs to keep. That's why these promoters don't want to work together most of the time. See, fighters don't understand all this. The promoters are a bunch of Apollo greeds. They're greedy bellies. Boxing is a business, people. It's a business jacketed by the sport of boxing, cloaked by the sport of boxing. Now, without you guys getting a better understanding of all this stuff, you can understand why some fights don't get made. This shit don't have nothing to do with the fighters. It's the promoters. Now, when you start talking about the lower levels, like a club show, Lou DiBella does a lot of these, where there's usually no TV involved. Look, it's tough for promoters to profit from those events. Now, at the higher levels, those revenue streams, they're huge. And that's why, like you remember when Mayweather created his own promotional company, that allowed him to access all the books and deals rather than accepting only a purse for the fight. And that's why now listen to what I just told you now. That's why with Al Haymon and PBC, he had all of his fighters form their own promotional companies. Because the revenue streams, right, were allowing the revenue streams at the highest level. The revenue streams are why all those guys were able to create their promotional company with Al Haymon advising them, which allowed them all to access the books and deals rather than accepting only a purse for their fights. And that's why those guys were so happy. Now, a lot of people didn't know that. Still don't know that. Danny Garcia, all those guys, Adrian Broner, About Billions, Promotions, all those guys, they would get out there getting paid, man, with serious deals. But nobody really took time to understand all that. Now, that whole thing about the Ali Act, kind of touch up on that again. Before the Ali Act, promoters weren't required to disclose all revenue sources and expenses deducted from a boxer's purse. Because, Don King was killing their ass. But, today, boxers contracted to a promoter are entitled to know the amounts of any compensation or consideration that a promoter is contracted to receive from a match. That's why Terrence Crawford was sitting there asking about the books. He was asking about all these things, right? All the way down to, the cent. And they were frustrated because of the shit he was asking. But he was able to ask that and get that information because of the Ali Act. Because, like I said, today, boxers contracted to a promoter, right, are entitled to know the amounts of any compensation or consideration that a promoter is contracted to receive from a match. And that's why they didn't want to talk to Terrence Crawford about how much money was going to be made. And that's frustrating as hell. Now you can see here that if they don't want to talk to the fighters that they're working with or going to work with, right, about this is what we're looking at. Because see, Terrence Crawford in any fight has every right to know, well, hey, if I'm going to fight your guy or if I'm going to fight somebody for you, well, I need to know exactly what kind of money's coming in. But, it just depends on if they sign some kind of deal. But no matter what, they can still look and see what kind of money is coming in. And although they may have signed a contract or something saying they'll only get paid a certain amount. They'll probably, go crazy when they find out, damn, I'm getting robbed. And I think that's what happened to Terrence Crawford over at Top Rank. He realized this is the only amount of money they're giving me, but they're making how much? Teofimo Lopez, same thing with Top Rank. I'm bringing all this money into you guys, all this compensation from Bud Light, all this stuff going on, and you only giving me how much? That's why Teofimo Lopez went crazy. Said he retired from boxing. And he comes back, he wants to fight in this place, he wants $20 million. Because he had an idea. He has an idea now about the amount of compensation and just how much the promoters have been receiving from the matches he's put on. Look, it's crazy, man. There's a whole lot that we could talk about here about all that crap. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Matchmaking, developing fighters are unappreciated areas. And I feel that way. Because all these guys are becoming superstars, man. But to try to really develop a fighter, get him the right experience, and help him to develop his skills and growing the fan base, I think going forward, the only way to do that is for promoters to work together, man. If not, all the fighters suffer. If the fighters suffer, the fighters can't go on, can't maximize profits, and ultimately the promotional companies aren't going to hit their targets, and then eventually you're going to see them continue to lose money and maybe fizzle out, and then there'll be no more. So to me, it's inevitable that these promoters start working together, man. I'm being honest with you. So we'll see, man. But I tell you what, if there's any promotional company who would know how to get this done for all the promoters to work together, it would be Top Rank. You know what I'm saying? These guys have been doing this for almost 50 years. They develop a lot of fighters. A lot of fighters. Big name fighters. Don King's another one. They're successful because they know just what they're doing. Big events, building fighters, working with other promoters, knowing how to talk, keeping them relevant, even when they're not fighting. And that is why I think there's no way around. These promoters, especially today, they've got to work with each other. They've got to do it. Because if not, when it comes to compensation, when it comes to the revenue, the dollar bill, y'all, they ain't gonna see it. Not what they want. And shit, next thing you know, you got Golden Boy fizzling out, Matchroom fizzling out, from just talking about boxing. And I don't know, then maybe the last one standing will be old Bob Arum at Top Rank. But at the end of the day, they need to figure it out, because PBC right now, it's like Mayweather says, I love saying this because it sounds so funny to me. A minor setback for a major comeback. But with this comeback, whether PBC's working with Amazon or Dazn or whatever the hell they're doing, I still think all these promoters are going to have to work together. And they're going to have to listen to these fighters, because these fighters, they deserve to know how all this works. A lot of them knows how this works now. And they understand the kind of money's being made now. And just at a point to where they're going to have to sit there and kind of meet halfway. Because you can have more and more fighters going out here on the limb, doing stuff their own way without the promoter. Which is going to make other fighters say, hey, I don't know if we really need need a promoter anymore. That's an outdated way of doing business. Especially when you look at how much money promoters are taking from fighters. The only one who's not hitting them over the head twice seems to be Al Haymon. And in addition to that, Al Haymon is making sure they have their promotional companies, so they're getting more than just a flat salary. They're getting paid. Y'all keep cool. I'm in the breeze.